Hey friends, it's Blake with Birthing Babies. I am here launching a brand new podcast, Birthing Babies for Birth Workers. A lot of times it's exciting when we have a passion, but we're trying to get all of the pieces together to get that passion off the ground and let it become a business. And so I am here to help doula you through your birth business. I am here to coach you, to give you the support, to give you the real world advice, answer the questions you might have, the ones you didn't know you had, and the ones that you're still trying to figure out.
Hey friends, today we're going to talk about location. There are a couple of different things I want you to consider when you're trying to decide where to hold your childbirth classes, or if you're a birth worker working in a different industry other than childbirth education, where to hold your client meetings or your classes. So the first thing that we're going to look at today is who are you trying to reach? And where are they already? We're also going to take into consideration things like how far it is from major areas, what the classroom space looks like, how easily accessible it is, and partnerships with network marketing. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast and it gives you some great ideas on how to find space for your classes. Those of you who are not new to me probably have heard me talk about Ideal Client Avatar more than the average person. I think this is a really important tool for marketing and making business decisions early on. If we don't know who we're trying to reach, we're not going to know how best to reach them. Let's do a little deep dive on who your ideal client avatar is. If you haven't already, pause the podcast and come back to it once you have an idea of who that is. So we're going to look at what region your ideal client avatar is living in. Are they in a rural area? Are they in an urban area? We're going to look at, do they drive? Do they take public transportation? We're going to look at all of those things when we try to find a location that is appropriate to meet the needs of your ideal client avatar. And so I want you to think about what location is easy for your ideal client avatar to get to. One way to consider this is by just looking at where they already are. It's very tempting for a lot of people to hold classes at provider offices. We know that if that is your client's provider, that they do have access to the building. They can easily get there, and they're probably going there pretty often. Looking at other places where your ideal client avatar might be, they could be at a chiropractor's office, a massage therapist's office, and there may be a birth space within your community. Looking at where they are helps us to determine how easily they can get there. Maybe it's a public library. So the first question I want you to answer is, where is my ideal client avatar already spending time? And is that a location that would be available to me? Or is there a location in close proximity to that location? Other things that we're going to look at is how spread out are your ideal client avatars? If you're in an urban area, how long is it going to take them, if you have a 6 p.m. class, to get from one side of the city to the other? Is it a centrally located location? Is it a space way out in the middle of nowhere, right? So if you're in a rural area, how rural is the location you've chosen? Is it somewhere they could run other errands and then also swing by class once they're done? We're going to look at things like parking. So if your ideal client avatar is driving, then we're going to need ample space for parking. We're going to look at whether or not, if you're teaching night classes, those parking lots are well lit and if it feels safe, right? So is this an area that's secluded or is it an area that's well trafficked? If your ideal client avatar is using public transportation, a consideration you may want to look at is how far from the bus line are these classes being held? Are there metro stops close to where you want to teach your class? How can your ideal client avatar reach you? What are the parking fees associated in an urban area? In the spirit of inclusivity, you'll also want to consider the building accessibility. Will they have to walk up and down stairs? Will an elevator be available to them? Will you be able to access the building after hours or on the weekends? Those tend to be the most popular class times. So we want to make sure that you have a classroom that is going to be accessible to you and your ideal client avatar. It may be early on that you're looking at daytime classes. That's appropriate if that's what's appropriate for your ideal client avatar. I always say there is somebody that will want what you're offering. You just want to make sure that you are marketing it to the right person. And so a Friday night class may be great for someone who works all week and is ready to change their, take off their business hat and put on their parenting hat, but it may be really difficult for somebody who's working in retail or in restaurant business. So think about your ideal client avatar when you think about the building accessibility and when you're timing your classes. We'll talk about that on another podcast, but those are all considerations to think about. Another thing is to think about how large you want your classes to be. If you are looking at primarily teaching or offering services that are one-on-one, you won't need nearly as much space as if you are looking at doing a larger class. When we talked about pricing our classes, we talked about an average class size of 6 couples. And so you're going to need a classroom space that will hold 12 people plus yourself with room to move if that is what you are looking at when you're building your classes out. If you're teaching a prenatal yoga class, you'll only need space for maybe 6 people, but they will need room to move. Will there be desks and tables available? I find sometimes it's great to have tables for people to take notes on. But if you don't have those, you can always bring something like a clipboard to class with you and have those. Looking at classroom size will definitely drive the size of the classes that you can offer. You'll also want to look at the comfort of the amenities within the space. So for many people, sitting in a folding metal chair for 3 hours on a Tuesday night would probably be considered uncomfortable. Now add being a pregnant person to that, and it would be almost excruciating, right? So what type of seating is available in this space? Is that something that you can change, or is that something that's pretty set in stone, right? So are these chairs that can be wheeled out into another space, or folded up and set aside, and maybe we bring in birth balls? Or are these hard wooden chairs that are going to be difficult to move around? I mentioned with accessibility also looking at the hours that the space is available. That will play a role. But I think one of the biggest things, especially early on, to look at is the cost of the space. So when I first started off as a childbirth educator, I reached out to so many classrooms. This is the personal storytelling portion of this podcast. So I reached out to so many locations that had classrooms. At that time, our public library was not open to for-profits, so that was not an option available to me, although now they have. And so I can use that community space if I so choose to. I reached out to the local YMCA. They charge $25 an hour. Well, I knew I wanted to have low-cost classes because I'm in a lower-income area. And so I knew $25 an hour with a low-cost class would encourage me to offer the class in a shorter format, and I didn't think that that would do this class justice, so I kept on looking. Finally, I was able to partner with the women's club that was local. They had their own building that they had leased from the county, and they were using that for social functions and monthly, weekly meetings. I'm not sure how often they met, but they told me that I could use their space for $25 a month with no limitations except for I couldn't overlap when they were using the space. And so that worked really well for me because I could teach a nice long class. I felt like I wasn't rushed to get in and get out just because of the cost. Especially early on when our class numbers aren't super high, it's very tempting to look at the hourly rate of the class space and whether or not that's appropriate. Currently, I am working with a provider office. They provide the space to me for free. And so I don't need to worry about the cost of the space when I am calculating the price of the class. I also hold classes in my own space, and the overhead for that space is covered by other services. So it's a little bit of a win-win. It took me a while to build out a program big enough that I could support having my own space. So that's something to consider, maybe not something you want to jump right off the bat with that. One of the other things to consider, so I mentioned maybe working with chiropractors, prenatal yoga studios, looking at other fitness areas, libraries, and community organizations when trying to find locations. But going back to where are they already? Once you identify who your ideal client avatar is and you look at where they are already, it opens up a wide array of places that they could be taking classes. Early on in my career, I offered a monthly workshop at the Babies R Us. I feel like I'm dating myself a little bit because Babies R Us has not been open in a very long time. It didn't really last very long before they closed, but that was a great opportunity for them to highlight something that they were doing for the service. And then I scheduled private classes from there. So that's another option. If your ideal client avatar is looking for private classes, you can do those in a smaller location. You can do them online. And that's another big opportunity that's come along since COVID, is that we have the ability to hold classes in an online space. And so maybe we do 1 or 2 hour meetups, but then we do a Zoom call also. So you can create a hybrid, you can create mostly online, and then we meet up afterwards for question, or you can do a completely online class. That's another topic for another day because there's so many great platforms out to host online classes. So right now we're just looking at where can we hold our physical classes. Think about, if you are already working in the birth industry, where you're getting your referrals from, and reach out to those people to see if perhaps they would be willing to offer you space outside of their operating hours. Maybe you can collaborate with a birth collective. And I know many people that will even hold childbirth classes in their home. If that is something that you're interested in doing, I do encourage you to reach out to your insurance carrier just in case somebody falls down the stairs or an accident happens, to make sure that you would be covered in that type of situation. I hope this was helpful. I hope I've gotten some ideas flowing in your brain and that you are able to better find a space that works well for you and for your ideal client avatar. If you are looking for more tips like this, please join me, Blake Slusser, at one of my online childbirth educator trainings. Those can be found at teachlamaze.com. I've been teaching and working in the birth world for about 13 years now and have met lots of people along the way, and I love to share stories and help people grow with their business. I wish you all the best.